supposedly every other week, but it's actually more like when we actually get around to it. We did do a show yesterday. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Martin Wagner, for the inaugural test run of we're going to literally, there's a pegboard full of audio equipment and cables running all over the place and a camera squeezed into the studio. And Frank's here helping out, doing the stream. Hi, Frank.
Frank's doing a fantastic job.
And John's over there on the soundboard and on the laptop that is both recording the audio so that there's a podcast to download and running Skype. That's right. We're actually going to take calls today. I made a post at the Atheist Experience, atheistexperience.blogspot.com, with instructions. Just to clarify what's going on, we are going to make an attempt to take calls. We have Skype running on the laptop. All the audio stuff works. We've already done a test call. What you need to do is download and install Skype if you haven't already. Create an account. It's free if you haven't already. And then add the account Atheist TV. That's Atheist TV, no space, one word. Are people popping up there for you yet, John? See? You guys in the chat room have already figured this out. So, and
we have such tech-savvy viewers.
So, yeah, as you can see, we're having to use handheld mics. We have to wear headphones.
This is Guerilla Television, people.
Yeah, I have a Christian flag that Thad left. We demand $6 million or we will never let you know.
And the screams of those who have wronged us will echo through the student union.
Look, I'll hold it upside down.
What is there a sticker on that for? It says
this was free.
How to wash it or what? Oh.
Yeah, this was actually free.
I see.
Thad ordered a bandana from someplace, and they sent this as the free one.
Wow, 500 bandana styles and 150 different. Can you get a skull caps? Can you get a Christian flag skull cap? I wonder.
I don't know.
Son of a gun. Well, $25 off our next order of over 50. We should get a bunch of Christian flag skull caps, and they must make those. It would be an injustice.
Yep. I don't know how much you turned up or down your headphones, and I don't know. Are all the levels good so far? Cool. Yeah. Okay, then mine's probably just a little loud on that. On the black box right here.
We're figuring all this out, gang.
The farthest one that way, just turn it down just a smidgen. And yeah, that's good. All right, so we should be able to hear everybody. Everything's working. Let me do what we almost yes, we can hear ourselves, which is good because I wanted to make sure the levels weren't disastrous. To recap, we normally do the show from the public access studio in Austin. They have received the money from the Time Warner evidently owed them as part of a contract. They're doing renovations. They're getting us all new equipment. So in addition to the nice little robotic Sony HD cameras that we have, there's going to be a whole new mini studio with new equipment. That's going to take about a month. Then after that's over, they're going to have to train people on the new equipment. We may be back in the studio early in August. It may be late in August. It could be later. We have no idea. In the meantime, we're going to do what we can to keep the show going by doing it live from here every Sunday. So I don't get Sundays off anymore, or one Sunday a month off like I thought I was.
Well, you had that 1 week off last Sunday, but that was a nice little bit of a breather while we were figuring all this stuff out still. So.
Yeah. Well, actually, we didn't do much figuring out. I've just been working a lot.
Very seat of the pants thing, but that's fine. That's what makes it fun.
So the schedule, as we understand it, is we're going to do the show today, Martin and I. We have no idea if we're going to go a whole 90 minutes. We might go 4 hours. We might go 20 minutes before everything blows up.
We might just decide to play Rock Band. I mean,
I got everything set up over there. We should have like a Guitar Hero Rock Band Atheist Experience thing.
That would be something else. Yeah. And we kick all your asses too.
Nobody would even care. But we'll do the show this week. We'll do the show next week. I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I'm doing all this calculation in my head. Sunday, July 5th will be, that's 3 weeks from now?
Something.
Yeah. We'll do a show that Sunday. The following Sunday, which is the 12th, I think, I'll be in Las Vegas at the Amazing Meeting 7. Ooh. Just absolutely giddy about that.
I don't get to go this year.
So there won't be a show that Sunday, but the following Sunday we'll be back, and we'll keep doing this. Feel free to email tv@atheist-community.org with questions, comments, feedback, criticism. Is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Can you hear the calls? Whatever. And we'll try and make improvements as we go through this over the summer. If public access TV ever actually goes away, as it has in a number of markets, what we're doing here, although we probably won't do it from the couch at my place.
These are a lot comfier than the chairs in the studio.
They are. I mean, and you can kick back. We could probably you'd take a nap when Pascal's wager calls.
Yeah, I feel like we just need beers on our bellies and a big thing of pretzels in the middle between us. And
so,
this is the life, I tell you.
We are not constrained by the requirements of public access community television anymore.
That's right. So
but we're still going to stick to them.
Oh,
because we'd like to be able to take the recording of this show and play it as a pre-recorded show so that Austin still gets the Atheist experience over the summer as well.
Fair enough.
So, we're going to do what we can. So I'm not going to, tell anybody how to send us money or start dropping F-bombs.
Flip the bird at the camera then or something like that.
Well, that's actually not against the rules. I just prefer not to.
Yeah. So we're a family show.
The announcements, because right now we're just
winging it.
We're making sure all the audio levels are right, and John is frantically going through people who'd like to call in. Here's the rules for calling in, by the way. Once you get Skype set up and you add Atheist TV user to your contact list, do not call us. Any incoming calls will be declined. Period. John gets a pop-up that says incoming call from so-and-so, decline. Send an IM in Skype to Atheist TV. John will read it. Include your name, your location, what you wanted to talk about, and he'll queue you up, in the order that we're going to go through calls, and we're going to just take call after call as we get them. And to show our dedication to doing this right, Martin and I didn't prepare anything for today. Not a thing. We don't have any. I don't have a table. I don't have. I've got a.
But there's plenty that we could do. There's quite a bit that we could talk about, at least while callers are sort of figuring the whole thing out. And but yeah, we're just. This is the most casual atheism you'll ever see.
Right down to the headphones. Next week we're going to have a speaker and probably lapel mics so that we don't have to be quite as Guerilla TV.
Yeah.
Quick ACA announcements. The Atheist Experience is sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. The ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, beginning around 11:30, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host our lecture series at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe. We have a number of other additional events throughout the weeks and months, including Atheist Happy Hour at the Dog and Duck on Thursdays. That's at the corner of 17th and Guadalupe. For more information about the ACA, you can go to our website, www.atheist-community.org. If you don't get through over Skype today, or you don't want to, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, all the co-hosts, the other people behind the scenes that are helping out here today. We cannot possibly respond to all of them. And given my work schedule lately, I'm 170 some odd emails behind. That's how many are sitting there that nobody else has answered that are specifically waiting on an answer from me.
And in the last couple of days, we have had a bit of an influx of Christians and theists simply copy-pasting entire pages from apologetics websites and then sending those to us as emails.
Yeah.
Going, what do you think about this? And it's like, look, no, that's not how it's done. Like, if you want to engage us, that's fine. But we really don't have a time to slog through some lengthy apologetic tedium, which you didn't even write, right? And I mean, we want to engage you, the viewer, and especially if you're a Christian and a theist, we want to talk to you. We want to know what you think about these things and what your beliefs are all about. And we're interested in answering questions that you might pose to us. But if you just want to, copy-paste 2,000 words of gibberish off of, whatever Ray Comfort page you found that you think is brilliant,
right.
That's just really lame, and we'll either ignore you or ridicule you if you send us those emails. So
it's one of the reasons why I keep asking, tell me what you believe and why. And I realize that some people aren't very good at explaining this, and they find a website that expresses what they actually believe. I get that. I understand it. But at least, paraphrase it. First of all, I don't want to read a long cut and paste from a webpage from some apologist. Second of all, I don't want to write a response to that on an individual basis. Person A sends me, Matt Slick's tag, for example, and I do a big long response to that person. Then the next person who tries to do that is either going to get a cut and paste of my response to the first one, which I think is way more than fair, or they're just not going to get a response. I tend to, if I identify that it's just cut and paste and it's a big long thing, I tend to just delete them. I'm more interested in what real people have to say. Even if all you have to say is, I can't explain it, I don't think I could convince you, I just believe because I believe. If that's the best you can do, fine. And as long as you understand that you're not going to convince everybody, we're probably going to get along much better, and I'm going to have a great deal more respect, and we might have more productive conversations, because that allows, that prompts questions. Well, why do you believe something that you say you can't understand or you don't know?
And usually that is when they run into a lot of difficulty, because case in point, we just had a fellow send the email address, this lengthy cut and paste of the cosmological argument, which I had just happened to have done a quick refutation of the last time I appeared on the program, and Russell and I discussed that on the show. And then this fella sends it again out of the blue and cluelessly. And but when we tried to back him down on, no, what is it that you believe? Why are you a Christian? Why do you think about all this stuff? Had nothing to do with the cosmological argument. Right. He went on about the usual things of, how he thinks archaeological evidence that supposedly proves the Bible and fulfilled prophecies and stuff like that. And we're like, well, then why did you waste our time sending the other thing? Why did you waste your time? And then when we tried to back him down on, well, why do you believe those things now that you say you believe, the prophecy stuff, the archaeological evidence stuff, he wouldn't back any of that up. And so it's very, very difficult to engage somebody who, just sort of curls up into a little passive-aggressive ball the minute that you try to challenge them on whatever it is that they really believe, especially when they write us in the first place. It's like, look, you wrote us. We didn't come to you. Yeah.
And I have extreme doubts. And no matter what somebody sends me, if they start with, tag or the cosmological argument or any of those standard philosophical arguments for the existence of God, I'm not going to necessarily call them a liar, because it's possible that there's somebody out there who came to be convinced by that particular argument. I don't think that's the case normally. I think that's an extremely rare exception if it ever does occur, and I'm very doubtful when somebody tells me this is why I believe, that this is really why they believe.
Oh, I'm certain that the tag was not the thing that converted Matt Slick to Christianity.
And without fail, every single time I have a conversation where we actually get down to talking about what they actually believe and why they actually believe it, none of those arguments have anything to do with it. They came to their belief for emotional, experiential reasons, some what I consider to be poor evidentiary standards, where this happened and I can't explain it. I had an aunt who died before I was born, and I had a dream about her, and I asked so-and-so, and clearly this is, okay, well, if anything, the closest thing you've come to is an argument for ghosts, not God. But you haven't even come close to the argument for ghosts either, so...
Yeah, or it's just they've believed it all their lives because they were raised in a Christian household, in a Christian family, Christian environment, and they've just never seen fit to question that.
Yeah, and I've had conversations with people of all types, people who were raised in a particular religious belief, and people who came to it later. I had an email from a guy who was raised an atheist by an atheist, and he told me a little bit about his life, and when it comes down to it, he had a couple of experiences that he couldn't come up with an explanation for, and this was sufficient for him to believe in a God. And there's so many things wrong. John, I don't know. Do we have callers that are waiting? Yeah. Well, who do we got? Let's take calls.
This is the big experiment. It's happening now, people, live somehow.
We have George in New York.
George
in New York.
You get to be the first caller.
All right.
Hook him up.
Mm-hmm.
Is it called George yet?
Okay. It's
George, answer your damn phone.
Supposed to be doing its thing. Well, hello, Skype. Okay, it's trying George again.
We are trying to call George again.
Okay.
I bet he's off playing WoW.
That might, yeah. He's just already lost interest in us.
George, you were going to be the first caller.
Okay, well.
Okay, I think we're going to have to go to...
Testing.
Hey, George.
There he is. Hi.
Can you...
Speak.
Hello, audio check.
Okay.
We can hear you.
We can hear you, yes. Can you hear us, George?
Oh, there it is.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we've heard you the whole time.
All right.
No, you know what it was? I like an idiot, like an apologist. I had the website on in the background, so I was getting a weird a Doppler effect.
Ah, okay.
So I'm hearing you on the headphones, and I'm hearing you out the speakers from the website.
Good point. If you're calling in and you're watching the show on Ustream TV Live, mute it.
Yeah.
Yes, muted.
Yeah, that's just like, people who sit there talking to us on their phones while their TV is on in front of them and they've got the volume up high.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
bounces back. So, but yeah, we can hear you great now.
I learned that the first time I called. The delay between our data feed here in Austin, Texas, is on the order of 11 or 12 seconds. I pinged it out, and so I actually must turn the speaker down, or you get an extreme time dilation effect.
Huh. Okay. Wow.
Well, okay. No need to go into the technical mumbo jumbos.
Yeah, blah blah blah.
But we're still figuring this out, so we're going to have a little geek fun with it.
Welcome to Atheist Experience from Dillahunty International Studios as our first caller.
It's an honor to be directly connected to Dillahunty International Studios.
I say it's really international.
Well, Texas is a republic, isn't it?
That's true. Yes.
And I'm
Long
calling
live.
From
Yeah, we've
the United States, so
seceded and everything, right? Just ask Rick Perry.
We might. So how's it going up in New York, George? What do you got for us?
Actually, I had another tech question real quick. Based on how your Skype is hooked up, can people call in from landlines, or is that something else they would need to set up with Skype?
It's something I think we would have to set up with Skype. Basically, we'd have to get a paid account.
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's something we might do. If this works out well enough, we might go ahead and see about assigning a number or forwarding something to it. But yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I was hearing you in before the call starts, and you were talking about the difference between people presenting formal apologetics arguments versus their personal experience, and I hate to say testimony, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
I think that's a good approach. For one thing, a lot of the formal apologetics or philosophical arguments are extremely complicated, and even if you have your ducks in a row, to present that sort of off the top of your head on a phone conversation is a little tricky. Those things, sometimes the content of something dictates the form of its presentation for optimal effect. Yeah. Some things need to be in writing, and you need to have time to sit there and with a cup of coffee and really read it at your own pace and chew over it, because there's a lot to go over, and it's not the kind of back and forth, the kind of badinage that works best when you have two people talking live.
See, one of the things that I'm looking forward to, I don't know, I'm hoping we have this capability when we're set up in the new studio. It's not going to happen here, but we already have green screen capabilities, and I'm sure that type of stuff will improve. But I'd like to get, and I have a laptop that's a tablet so that you can write on it. I'd actually like to get a video output of that so that you could draw diagrams and have them appear behind us or instead of us, in order to make some of the more complicated arguments a little simpler.
You mean like GoToMeeting?
Kind of like GoToMeeting. I don't want to pimp out specific, brandages, but
any collaborative whiteboard application.
Yeah. Only I don't want it to be collaborative. I am the only one that gets to touch the whiteboard.
Imagine this mighty lightboard.
Just like House.
Don't you dare touch.
Yeah, those would be some interesting graphics, let me tell you.
Unless I got a Vicodin overdose, nobody else is getting my marker for the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And also because as you guys have already encountered more than once, most of the apologists really don't have their story straight. And I'm not saying this to be a wise ass, but the cold fact is they don't have their own story, most of them, and they say the most outrageous things, or as you've discovered, they say things that really don't have any relevance to them.
Yeah.
Because when you ask them, why are you an XYZ, they never say, well, one day I was in the library and I was, reading through, the Case for Christ, and Lee Strobel said this, and I said, oh, goodness, he's correct.
Yeah.
Almost nobody has that story.
Right. That was my whole bugaboo with people who do these little cut-paste emails that they send us where, like, oh, here's tag, or here's the column, or here's the ontological argument, or what have you. I am almost entirely certain that... in almost 100% of cases, that was not the thing that made them Christian, right? And if that was not the thing that converted them, then my question is, well, why are you sending this to us?
Right.
Why not just tell us what converted you? Why assume that that would not be good for us? Are you sending us this because you don't think that what converted you is actually a good enough set of reasons to convert, and you think that we need this on top of what it was that converted you, or exactly what is your reasoning? And
it may be, just as a thought, it may be because they correctly discern that there is such an element of subjectivity in that kind of a story.
Yeah.
If you say to someone, I had a personal, transcendent, metaphysical experience, and I say, oh, really? Prove it. Well, there we are. I suspect the reason many of them will hit you with historiography or philosophy is because they sense that there is a mutual arena you can both enter into there and see who makes the more solid case. Whereas if I say, God talked to me last night, he said everything's going to be okay, how do you know? Am I nuts? Am I lying? Am I completely on the level? There's simply no way to discern that empirically.
Yeah, and I'd say that, and to kind of summarize what all three of us have said, what I think happens in the overwhelming majority of the cases, and I'd estimate 99 if not higher, is somebody comes to believe in a particular God claim or a particular set of religious precepts, and then for whatever reason, a reason that is not intellectual, that is not evidence-based, it's whether you're raised in that religion or you've had some experience or you've exercised some fallacy or you've had some perhaps real experience that you attribute to that God. And then later on, when you realize that you're going to need to explain this to other people, you find things that seem to reaffirm your beliefs. As a Christian, reading, for example, Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, if that's all you actually read, and if you don't analyze it critically, that is probably one of the single best books to reaffirm your perspective on the truth. As a Christian, when I read Josh McDowell, it was like, well, duh. Now all this stuff that I've been taught, here's the justification for it, and my beliefs are rationally justified. It wasn't, and the same is true to some extent for Lee Strobel's books. It wasn't until I read people who challenged the assertions of these guys that I began to assess the actual arguments. McDowell and the others do a very good job of preaching to the choir.
They do, and also one of the things that my experience with both McDowell and Strobel was that once I learned something about Bible history and began to study it critically, or as a text, as you would study Greek mythology once I began to approach it anthropologically, as opposed to reading it or reflecting on it as a believer, I became very upset with both of them and with other apologists because you can start seeing the tricks they're playing.
Yeah.
And in the case of Josh McDowell, he's a smart enough guy. I don't think some of these people have done serious work. They have studied history. They're good debaters, and you know that he knows that there are problems with what he's saying unless you share his assumptions.
Yeah,
but he's deliberately he's holding that card under his shirt, and you almost wish he would say, "Look, I'm a believer, and this is my reason why, but I acknowledge that people who don't come where I'm coming from, this will not be convincing." If they would just say that out loud, I'd have more respect for them, as opposed to pretending that this is some airtight case they're making, and the only reason why I, or you for that matter, or Martin or any of us, don't agree with it is because we're acting in, if you'll excuse the expression, bad faith.
Yeah.
We just don't want to accept it.
Yeah, we're just being rebellious and denialist about the whole
Yeah.
thing. And I think that, that's an excellent point. And, but at the same time, I would say there's probably a very good reason why they don't just come flat out and admit, that these arguments aren't enough on their own to persuade anyone who is a pretty solid unbeliever, because then, well, what have they done? They've just taken all the power away from it. I mean, it's one thing to, part of, I think, what gives it that power towards people who are already believers, when they hear these arguments, that McDowell make and that Strobel make, and that to someone who is already very solid in their Christian beliefs, will go, wow, okay, well, here's all the rational justification for my beliefs. But if you present one of those arguments, but at the same time then say, but this isn't good enough to convince an atheist, Well, then that I think would throw the believer into a bit of confusion in the sense of saying, but it sounds really good, but at the same time you're already admitting that it's not. So
yeah, they're asserting that
Yeah,
they're asserting that absent the personal experience that they've had, the evidence alone supports them, and that's an assertion that I don't buy. Now, the curious exception to this rule is Ray Comfort. I have Ray's new book. It's called "You Can Lead an Atheist to Evidence, but You Can't Make Him Think: Answers to Questions from Angry Skeptics." We talked about it a little bit. Russell and I are actually going to go through this and talk about it in more detail. This is a free, to be fair, autographed copy that Ray sent me, but not because he knows me. They basically had a, hey, if you're an atheist and you want a copy of this book, send an email here and we'll send it to you. I did. I got the book. Thank you very much. I already had another copy, so it's not like...
How many responses did he get to that, by the way, that little offer?
160 or something like that.
So it
Maybe
wasn't
190.
Yeah, it didn't exactly, wasn't a big mob.
I struggled.
I have to ask you something.
Yeah.
Did many endless hours of grinding on WoW prepare you psychologically for going through a Ray Comfort book?
No. Because I still haven't made it through this book. Matter of fact...
And look, it's not exactly a giant...
It's tiny.
It's a pamphlet, right? I mean,
and it's it's not robust at all. But
it's 133 pages.
It's painful. But the reason I bring this up is that Ray is different from guys like Lee Strobel and Josh McDowell, in that if you go to Ray's blog, I think sometime within the last 2 weeks, he's flatly claimed that his reason for believing, and by the way, he doesn't claim to believe, he claims to know with absolute certainty that God exists and Jesus is, because he has a personal relationship, and this is beyond question for him. And he says that his belief, his knowledge, has nothing at all to do with the historical evidence for the existence of anything that Lee Strobel or Josh McDowell might bring up in arguments. None of these are relevant to Ray. Ray knows because he knows. Now, consider that when you reread the title of this book. You can lead an atheist to evidence, but you can't make him think.
Even though the evidence is totally irrelevant.
What we really have here is you can lead an atheist to evidence and you can make him think. You can lead a Christian to evidence and you can make him think. You just can't lead Ray Comfort to evidence and make him think, because he has an absolute certain knowledge that is immutable as a preconception. There is no evidence you could possibly present to Ray that could ever convince him that he is wrong about the existence of God. And this is something he's said over and over again. So how completely dishonest and clueless do you have to be to write a book accusing the people who disagree with you of being unable to think and evaluate evidence?
When you've already admitted evidence doesn't matter.
When evidence didn't matter to you, and no new evidence could possibly matter to you.
Well, it sounds like Ray just slipped on his own divinely designed banana peel.
Yes. Yeah.
But I've had Christians say to me, if the Romans had managed to kill all the apostles before they even got out of their original congregations, and if they had burned every copy of every document, every Pauline epistle, everything, you name it, and there was no New Testament, I would still believe, because of course Jesus is God. And he is supernatural, and he's magic. And they're not saying this to be funny. They're quite serious. We're talking about divine agency and providence. So one way or another, the reality of my faith, the justification of it would have been provided for me. So they say to me, you don't have to study your way to salvation. It's nice if you can, but it's not required.
Yeah.
It seems to me that that's a fair argument, but hang on. If you're saying that, then you have no excuse whatsoever when I say to you, please produce this divine being of yours.
Right.
If I don't have to study my way into it, I will put the book down right now and have this thing show up. And
to be fair, Ray is the only guy I know who will flat out say that. He will tell you, and he has said many times, he can demonstrate, prove to you absolutely that God exists in 30 seconds. And he says, he gives the explanation of what you need to do. You just need to, hit your knees and with a sincere heart ask God to reveal himself to you, and he will. And Ray knows this is true because the Bible tells him this is what will happen, and his knowledge of God tells him this is what will happen. And then when people say, well, I've done that, Ray has got the standard excuses. Well, you weren't sincere. You weren't, it's your fault, not God's. God's going to reveal himself to you when he wants to. And so, okay, well then basically you were lying that you could demonstrate this. Well, I could demonstrate to you if you were sincere, but you've hardened your heart type thing. It's this weirdly twisting thing. But
well, it's classically non-falsifiable.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's something that doesn't require any proof whatsoever, and it's something where you can completely make any excuse that you want when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. Karl Popper would slap him.
Yeah. And George, on that note, I'm going to let you go because we want to try and get as many Skype callers in as we can today. But I greatly appreciate you calling in. And
yeah, it's awesome to talk to you all the time.
Martin and
George.
I are
Thank
doing
you.
it on the love seat, but you were our first.
Love seat.
Well,
yes.
well. Hey, 3 biblically significant.
That's right.
That's very true.
All right. Good luck, guys. Take care.
Thanks again. Thanks again.
Who dost we have next?
Oh boy.
Question from Caffeine in Greece wants to know if it's still a spoon.
Yes, it is still a spoon. As a matter of fact, I can go grab it in a minute if anybody needed to see it, but it's still a spoon and it's still safeguarded. It has not turned into a fork. It has not moved. I left it in a place where it could move even. Granted, you're supposed to be, all you Christians out there, specifically the one who emailed me about this, you're supposed to be praying that God turns the spoon into a fork or a knife, since somebody's claiming that that's what happened to them on several occasions.
What if he splits the difference and makes it a spork?
I'd almost take that, as long as it's in my possession. But yeah, it's still a spoon.
Patrick in Richmond, Virginia.
By the way, that question was from Caffeine in Greece. I know you guys can't hear John, but I can.
Calling Patrick in Richmond, Virginia.
And I've just realized it looks really bad on screen when I take a sip of my water, so sorry about that.
Yeah, we got one camera, so
yeah,
if somebody
but it's
picks a nose or-
it's one
Patrick,
gets
Patrick
thirsty.
in where?
Richmond, Virginia.
How are you, Patrick?
We can hear you, Patrick.
Doing all right, thank you. How are you guys doing?
Good.
We're fine.
Thank you for calling in.
This little experiment seems to be panning out.
For taking my call.
Sure.
This is my first time calling here, so I'm kind of excited.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it.
Well, you get to see us sitting here on the couch.
On
so.
the love seat.
What you got?
Okay. Well, I was watching your exchange with Cobain the Christian on YouTube the other day. I watched the whole thing. I have a question in relation to something you said in it. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I want to make sure I'm stating you correctly, but you were talking about historical evidence for a miracle, and you said that in literary account, it's not sufficient to establish a miracle's happening literally in history. That's by your own standards. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let's consider the example of the feeding of the 5,000. This is the one miracle outside of the resurrection that is mentioned in all 4 Gospels. I'm just curious about what kind of evidence would be necessary for you to establish this as a literal historical event by your own standards.
I don't know that any such evidence could be presented to account or to justify claiming that a miracle occurred. The events, we could establish that specific aspects of the events occurred, but I don't know that something that far removed historically, the supernatural, miraculous nature of it, I don't know that there's any type of evidence, literary evidence, that would suffice.
And this is not just something that we would be setting the Bible up for special criticism for, too.
It-
There are a lot of historical writings where historians and scholars will tell you up front, we cannot entirely verify this sort of thing. I mean, there's no real evidence, for example, that Socrates actually existed. There's a lot of debate about that. The histories of Herodotus, which are still sold and studied and circulated, and he was a very, very early historian back in antiquity, writing at the time, but he's well known. It's been shown that a lot of the stuff that he's written in his histories was just, it's the kind of thing that you get when you're a tourist in a foreign country and you have the tour guide who's happy to take your money and tell you whatever crap you want to hear, right? So there are many, many historical documents where unusual events are discussed in such a way to where, there's just no way we can confirm this entirely. Maybe an event really did happen, but does it have the significance that we're being told?
I want to kind of clarify this, because after the conversation, this type of thing has come up several times, and I'll do this quickly, and then you can talk again, I promise. I'm not dismissing that and saying there is no evidence. There is evidence. I mean, it's, anecdotal, testimonial type evidence that an event occurred. There may be, for some events, sufficient evidence, including testimonial, anecdotal evidence, for me to acknowledge that an event occurred, and perhaps even an unexplained event occurred. The additional claim that's being made that, for example, Jesus fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 3 fishes, even if we had enough reports, testimonials to establish that event occurred in some aspect, we have nothing to establish and assert the miracle nature, the source of this. It's kind of like, and I swear I'm not just trying to diminish this, but it's kind of like if someone has done a card trick for somebody, if you hear them recount what they saw afterwards, it's almost shocking to hear what some people say happened. The reports may be correct, they may be incorrect, but in any case, if I, in front of your face, turned one card into another card, that doesn't tell you anything at all about how I did it. And that's kind of the limitations. Now, there's plenty of things that I have no problem at all accepting happened. And I'd also point out, as I did before, that I don't have a big issue with accepting that Jesus existed. I'm not banging a drum saying, no, there's no historical Jesus. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't consider the existence of Jesus to be this big thing to cast massive doubt on either. It seems to be a serious issue for a lot of atheists, but I've never really thought it was one myself. Another thing to remember is that these were ancient times, and pre-rational, pre-scientific culture in many ways, and even educated people of those times would spread these kind. There was an aura of mysticism and the supernatural that just sort of pervaded life. And you can read a lot of other histories. For example, Suetonius, again, is another great Roman historian.
Well, I want to get back to Patrick because I think he had a follow-up question.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that
we talked for an hour about one.
I know. Well, you'll read in his histories where he'll just report on things like omens and supernatural events, and right in the context of straightforward historical accounts, and you take these seriously. And people told these stories and believed them. So why wouldn't similar stories have been built up around this rabbi of Jesus, who is apparently extremely popular, and a lot of people talking about him?
Well, I mean, I don't really have too much of a follow-up question. I mean, it was really just, and you said that you're willing to accept that certain things happened, and then, well, I think let me actually return to the card trick example. I mean, I think, kind of as a basic rule of our own experience, I think we can basically assert that this is not some kind of supernatural intervention when someone does a card trick. I mean, I think that sort of example in particular is kind of something that people bring up all the time, kind of as an example. But
okay, what if I made an elephant disappear?
Card tricks are illusions, and I know how to do like a bunch of card tricks. And
what if I made an elephant disappear?
Made an elephant disappear? That's something different, but it's still.
Copperfield did it.
It's no reason necessarily. It depends on the environment. I would say. I mean, Are you in a magic show, or are you just in the middle of a zoo? I guess there would be two different things we could discuss there. But
the reason we know that the reason you're so comfortable asserting the two different things is because we have knowledge. Did we lose the stream? Are you still there, Patrick?
I'm still here.
Okay, cool. We have knowledge of people doing these things by natural means, intentionally to trick people.
Right.
I have no idea what occurred in the first century around the specific events of the life of Jesus, for example. I have the biblical accounts, and I'm comfortable accepting aspects of those. I don't see sufficient evidence to accept either that miracles occurred or the claims about why they occurred.
Okay.
And it would really be hard to get that at this point in time.
Yeah.
But the thing is that so many Christians would say, I shouldn't broad brush it. What I've heard from a lot of them is that, well, this is a preconception of yours that is preventing you from accepting. Well, yeah, it's a preconception that is preventing me to accept and based only on that evidence. But the scenario that they happen to believe in is one where this same God still exists and can still do these miracles, yet will not provide me with the same evidence that those eyewitnesses had.
Yeah.
Why? Why are they more deserving of eyewitness direct? Why is Paul's Damascus Road experience good enough for Paul but not good enough for me?
Well, I guess in the example of Paul, I mean, he was a mass murderer that was killing Christians, and he would ultimately become probably the person responsible for spreading Christianity around the world and making it exist today. So I think it's more important that he would have had it than you, because if you became a Christian, I mean, you may convert some people to Christianity, but you wouldn't convert millions and millions and make it so that ultimately people far, far, far in the future would know what Christianity is all about.
Okay, then give the experience to Dawkins.
Yeah, I was just about to say the very same thing.
But I find that answer just, I mean, I apologize, but silly. You're claiming that the people who can do the most get the most. But don't you think that God loves everybody equally and wants them all to go to heaven?
It's not that I'm claiming that people who do the most get the most. This is an issue of one person in particular that would ultimately do.
Okay,
I mean,
but God is all powerful, and could not He inspire just about anyone with the wherewithal and the sense of dedication that Saul ended up having to do the same kind of work?
I mean, I could probably say he probably could have, but I can't say anything like that with any certainty.
Well, if the goal here is to get people to become saved or adhere to whatever particular doctrine you seem to, and I to be fair, I haven't asked yet, so I'm not quite sure what you're espousing, but why wouldn't a God give that revelation to everybody? I mean, why stay hidden from some people? And because, okay, Paul, for example, Paul gets this experience, and your claim is that perhaps it was more important for him to get the experience because this served to convert a lot of people. And I would say that anybody who was converted on the basis of Paul's testimony was unjustified in doing so, because, it's David Hume pointed out, a revelation is necessarily first person. To everybody else, it's hearsay. If you got a direct revelation that was equivalent of Paul's and called the show to tell me about it, you couldn't possibly convert me, and I don't think you should expect to, because your experience is not mine, and Paul's experience is not mine.
So why were you asking to give it to Dawkins? I mean, if his experience is his own,
no, well, he was responding specifically to your answer, which was, well, God gave the experience to Paul because God knew that Paul would be the guy who could go out there and make Christianity a big global phenomenon and convert billions.
You were making an implication about notoriety
and
or
influence.
And
so since Dawkins is currently the most influential atheist in the globe, then here's another a possibility for God to take hold of in the same way that you're saying that he did for Saul. Go ahead, convert Dawkins, have Dawkins turn around, write a brand new book saying I was completely wrong in the God delusion, and here's my testimony for Jesus and what have you, and then see what that does to atheism.
And I'd also say that in the case of Dawkins, if he gets a Damascus Road experience as well, that's not going to convince me. Why should it? It's his experience, not mine. Why should somebody convert based or believe something based on somebody else's experience, ever?
Well, let me talk about the first thing.
Okay.
I know this is not exactly the same thing because this person didn't become a Christian per se. But does the fact that Anthony Flew now believes in God or in some kind of God convince you of the reliability of theism in any respect?
No.
Okay.
No, and I'll tell you why. For one thing,
you asked me why if we gave it to Dawkins, if he became a Christian, what would that do to atheism? Well, one of probably the foremost atheist philosopher converting to some form of deism, and that didn't do very much for atheism. So
I
why should we
agree.
believe Dawkins?
I agree, it didn't. And
My point about Dawkins was only responding to your one implication about notoriety and influence. That's it. I don't think that should matter, and I would never think that it should matter. It was only in response to that one point.
I mean, I think we also do need to keep into account that Paul was a mass murderer. Again, he was basically a terrorist.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think in this particular case, giving the information to Paul not only stopped him from killing people, but it also made it so that Christianity still exists. I mean, I think if we gave it to Dawkins, why do I keep saying we? I think if God gave that information to Dawkins, it wouldn't affect the fact that Christianity would still exist 100 years from now. I really don't believe that.
Well, let me ask you this. I realize we're going back into a presumption of yours that I disagree with, but what Saul was doing was killing Christians.
Right.
And what do you believe there's a hell?
I believe there is some kind of hell. Yes, I'm not sure what it's like, but yeah.
Okay. In any case, somebody spends eternity either in oblivion or in eternal torment or something.
Yes.
Okay. What Saul was doing could be viewed as sending Christians to meet their maker. What Dawkins and the rest of us are doing, in anybody that we deconvert, or not that that's necessarily a goal, but we are specifically preventing people and seeking to prevent people from accepting something that you think sends them to heaven, and the rejection of which, maybe, I'm not sure on all your criteria, would potentially send them to hell. So wouldn't it be more beneficial for God to start converting these major atheists than it would be for him to convert Saul?
Well, I don't know. I think in many ways now, especially, and now that Christianity has been set and the foundations have been laid, I think that mostly the work on behalf of coming to God is not his doing, as in that it is our doing, that we can choose to,
I completely agree there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think if God were to, flat out show up to Dawkins and or just any of these mainstream atheists, I don't know. I mean, if all of them just converted, I really don't think it would be that much of a huge impact on what's going on in the world. I mean, it may save some people, but I think God's main intention is, to bring, not necessarily to bring, but have people come on their own accord. And I think that would probably violate some kind of sentiment that he has at this point. I'm not sure. I don't know, but yeah.
Well,
that's all I have.
What reason could you possibly think of that God wouldn't just reveal himself directly to everyone?
Just based on the fact that, some I could say that God has already revealed himself to everyone in certain senses. I believe.
Well, forget all the other certain senses. Let's talk about revealing himself. To us. I am God.
Russell made the point yesterday on the Nonprofits, and I think this is well made, even though it's based on some amusing fiction. As Douglas Adams pointed out, when the Vogon destructor fleet shows up, they broadcast a message to everybody on Earth that is completely unambiguous, that is understood by everybody. We're sorry, but your planet's been scheduled for destruction, and you have 8 minutes, whatever. Are the Vogons more powerful than God? Couldn't God do something like that?
I'm not sure if God necessarily would want to do something like that.
Well, okay. My question is that, assuming that a God could do something like that, which I think, at least by my previous understanding of the Christian God I used to believe in, and what I hear as far as the capabilities of God from most believers, I think that definition of God would include the ability to do this. Now, yes. Given that ability, my concept of God previously, and the concept of God that I hear presented by so many Christians that call into the show and write, is a God who actually has as a desire the salvation and love and respect of everybody.
Right.
So why, given those two things, would he not do something like that?
I think one thing I could say would be that, all right, let's say that God shows up just like that fleet or whatever, and says, gives an unambiguous, writes in the clouds, I am Jesus, worship me. And everyone comes to believe that God exists. Mm-hmm. I don't think necessarily that his primary concern is for us to believe that he exists. I think his primary concern is just to have a relationship with him and to.
Well, wouldn't that entail believing he exists? Why?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, but I think he cares more about the fact that we would actually, worship him or do something.
But I'm fine with that.
I think believing he exists I mean, I think if everybody believed he exists, I mean, I think that would kind of create some kind of artificial situation in which, hey, I mean, now that we know that there's a God here who's
No.
I don't think so. I don't agree with that.
Here's the thing. I can almost kind of make your point for you in this. If God pulled the Vogon trick, I would no longer be an atheist. I would believe that a God exists. That, however, does not mean that I would worship that God or follow his instructions or think he was a good guy or any of those other things. Now, it's possible that, much like the person with a gun to their head, that with the direct knowledge of this God's existence and the threat of hell, that I and others might claim that, but that would be absurd because surely this God should be able to see that I'm just faking it. However, the knowledge of the existence of a God does not necessitate the worship or adoration or respect of somebody else. And even within the mythology of Christianity, you have clear examples of this. Satan, for one. Certainly Satan in that mythology absolutely knows with no doubt that a God exists, yet does not choose to worship.
Right. I mean, what I was basically saying is that, I mean, even if God did show up, I mean, what good would that do? I mean, honestly,
it would. It would change the focus. If somebody sends you a letter and says, "I want you to love me," and that's all, that's it. You don't know that person. Could you ever make any kind of assessment about whether or not you could love them? Don't you have to know that person first? If a God's goal is for people to love and worship him, first of all, I'd say that those are things that are earned. But also, I cannot love or worship something that I don't even believe exists. So at a minimum, there's a minimum level of information that needs to be presented to everybody in order for them to be able to rationally make a decision about whether or not, what they feel about this thing. Now, even as a fictional character, I can tell you that the character of God in the Bible is, if it's accurate, fiction or not, is not the type of individual that I would respect or worship. But if that God were to appear and say, "I exist," the scope of the conversation would change completely. Not to one of whether or not it exists, but whether or not this is the sort of being anybody should respect.
I don't know. I guess, I mean, we're way off track from what I was originally talking about, but I guess I could wrap this up and say
well, that's what these conversations do.
Yeah, and sorry, just go where they go.
That's
Go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. I think I had a train of thought and then it completely derailed.
Well, you're always welcome to call back. I apologize for derailing you.
No. I'll figure it out. Actually, while I think about it, can I make a comment on the first caller and what you guys were talking about before?
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember you were saying something I thought was totally justified and correct. I'm a Christian, but the reason I'm a Christian apologist even. But the reason that I believe in Christianity is different from the evidence that I believe is valid. I'm probably a Christian because I was raised in a Christian home and because I was raised in church,
right.
And probably because of emotional things. But there was a time in my life when I was in high school that I kind of realized that I was believing based on complete blind faith.
Mm-hmm.
I was accepting whatever my pastor told me, and that was okay with me. And then all of a sudden I realized that that's not okay with me. And so then I kind of sought out a reason for what I was believing. I kind of went on a quest to decide, is what I'm believing actually right? And if it is, then I should probably take it more seriously than I am. And if it isn't, then I just need to abandon it altogether. And through the evidence that I've encountered, through the works of apologetics like William Lane Craig or et cetera, I've come to believe since then that there is legitimate reasons to believe. There are legitimate reasons to believe that Christianity is valid. But the reason I guess I still believe, technically, is because I was raised as a Christian.
And see, your story mirrors my own to quite a great degree. I was raised. I walked down the aisle at a revival at the age of 5. And of course, when I became a teenager, I began to understand what Christianity was all about, and what the Southern Baptist beliefs were all about. And I realized, oh my gosh, if I'm only beginning to grasp this now, then clearly I wasn't saved when I was 5. How could I possibly have an understanding of this? So then there's the get saved again or rededicate, and this would happen a couple times. And then one day, it was, well, why, do I really have any evidence for this? Why do I believe what I believe, etc.? And I began investigating, and I read, like, Josh McDowell's Evidence to a Verdict, by the way. That settled it. I mean, seriously, you read through that, and as long as you don't go beyond that, it is probably one of the most reaffirming things you'll ever read. And if you want to read something, an impassioned plea for Christianity that doesn't delve into evidence or philosophy too much, you've got guys like C.S. Lewis. And that is really good for reinforcing their beliefs. What happened was I came across some people who launched specific objections to those. And I thought about that, and I studied, and it was a period of years that this occurred. But you reach a point, or I reached a point, to be fair, where all of a sudden I started to realize that what's happening is apologist A makes some historical claim or some philosophical argument, and non-theist X offers their objections to it, their criticisms, their reasons for rejecting it, and there is no valid response from the apologists. The objections and criticisms stand. And from that, I tended to go a step further, which was, let's take a step back and analyze this question from I hate to use words like this, but from a more meta perspective. Let's go back and find out, is there a God? What kind of God could there be? Is there any reason to suppose this thing exists in the first place? But I didn't just do all this in a vacuum. I was still a sincere, devout Christian. Granted, I was, depending on what particular religion you were raised in, there are a number of different words for it. I was tremendously backslidden. I was leading a largely secular life for a number of years towards the end of my time in the Navy. But there was a serious period where my intent was to reaffirm my faith and get the answers that I needed in order to be a better witness for Christ and win more souls, if that's what God wanted me to do, if God wanted me to be a preacher, whatever. So during this entire investigation, it wasn't just an intellectual pursuit where I said, yeah, boy, they really trumped the theist there. Pascal's wager is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It took me a while to realize that Pascal's wager is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But this was all done with the goal of being a better Christian in, not constant, I mean, I did eat and sleep, but continual prayer and Bible study and appeals to God. Now, maybe there is a God. Maybe the Christian God is real, and he just decided that he didn't have any use for me. Or maybe I wasn't as sincere as I thought I was, although I can't possibly imagine me being any more sincere about anything. No answers came, and I didn't just stop believing in God because I wasn't hearing anything. It was not only did no answers come from God, no answers came from anywhere else. These objections still stand. There is not a single philosophical argument for the existence of God that is both valid and sound. Not one.
I mean, I would disagree with you on that, but I mean, that's a completely separate issue. I mean, I think in many cases, I think, that whole story is valid, and I'm sure it's completely true. But I mean, I think it's one thing to say that, no answers came from anyone else. I think there certainly are answers, and the question is not whether they are answers, but whether they are good or bad answers.
And clearly, they must have been bad answers. If
sure, there were no good answers.
Opinion, as you assess them by your own methodology. I mean, I think that there are certainly a lot of bad answers available, but there are certainly some good and true answers.
Like, I mean, it's probably unfair for me to necessarily put you on the spot like that, but I mean, if you happen to have a good example.
Yeah.
I mean, in what? I mean, you're asking a huge question. Like, could you narrow that down a little bit?
I don't know. You could pick your favorite.
Yeah, like in the list of things that you think are very good and strong philosophical responses that are persuasive.
That are accurate, that are sound.
I mean, just pick one. And
you don't have to do it. I mean, you can call back or you can email, whatever. I'm seriously, I don't mean to be putting you on the spot. You're a nice guy. We've had a great conversation.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that all of the arguments are, you can identify a fallacy or a non-demonstrated premise, that there is some premise there that is not demonstrated to be true. And what that does to the argument is it renders it unsound because the premise has not been demonstrated. Mm-hmm. Now, if from coming from the standpoint of a believer, the arguments appear to be sound. I mean, when you see, like, granted, almost nobody sees or understands Plantinga's modal logic version of the ontological, but it's that type of thing where, by the way, that drives me crazy because almost nobody understands it, and yet I keep hearing about it. Nobody was convinced.
I'm not sure what I think about the ontological argument. I've never really been too much of a fan. I don't usually use it in a debate whenever I do have them.
So is there anything apart from your personal testimony, your own experience, that you would use to convince somebody that a God exists, any God, or yours specifically? I mean, what would be the first, plan of attack in that conversation?
If I was trying to convince someone of the existence of God, I wouldn't refer to my own personal experience or to anyone else's personal experience, most likely. I would probably, an argument that I tend to use a lot is the cosmological argument. You mentioned it earlier. Mm-hmm. And I guess we can go through that argument if you want. I've been calling for almost 30 minutes now, but if you want to show me why you believe that my, I guess, response to it would be invalid, we can go ahead and do that.
Well, Martin did a show on that argument before.
Okay. And
since there are other callers waiting, I don't know that it'd be fair to go through it in detail, although somebody's going to post this as a YouTube clip and say we're ducking. Sure. So let me say, Patrick, since we're going to keep doing the show from here and doing Skype, and you obviously have Skype, if you'd like to call in next week and go over the cosmological argument, lightly, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, because you've been a fantastic caller.
I appreciate it.
Enjoyed talking, listening to the two of you guys. But just to give you a really quick primer, because I think we do want to get on to some next folks. The Kalam is one of those that I think suffers from exactly the problem that Matt just mentioned, a faulty, unsupported premise, which is some of the premises of Kalam. Kalam essentially starts with everything that begins to exist has a cause, and then it goes to the universe began to exist, therefore the universe had a cause. Well, that's where it runs into a problem. We don't actually know anything about the ultimate origin of the universe. We do not know that the universe began
at all
to exist. But that's a premise of the Kalam argument. So essentially, because it assumes something in its premise, in its very premise, that has not in fact been established as incontrovertibly true, then the argument kind of crumbles right there. But do call back and then also write us through email and participate with us on the blog, because you have been the ideal theist caller that we love to talk to, and we appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys taking my call so much.
Sure. Oh, definitely, thank you.
No kidding, call back in and we can hash out some other stuff. Patrick, thanks a lot.
You take care, all right, bud? Have a good day.
You too.
I'd have said God bless, but somebody would have chuckled, and it was being nice.
No, he was an excellent caller, and we really do appreciate this. And that's one of the calls that makes the atheist experience what it is.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
And we'll have to do Kalam again with him later. I completely agree. The undemonstrated premises in there is the universe began to exist. That's not necessarily true, and it's a bit of wordplay in the sense of what you mean by universe. Do you mean the universe in its current state, the point from the Big Bang onward, or everything that was there, the singularity, etc.? Yeah. It's way too much to go into, and it's not fair to do it now that Patrick hung up. Who's next, John? Alan in Los Angeles, California. How are you?
How you doing, man?
Doing well. How are you guys?
We are great. This
great.
Little experiment appears to be panning out. So
yeah, we are doing Ghetto TV today.
All right. So when I was a kid, I spent a lot of time in hospitals, and the doctors were always quite serious and rational. That was refreshing because I never had a reason to distrust them. Whenever they said I'd be feeling better, I usually ended up feeling better. But I'd spend most of the time with the nurses, and they used to tell me about God and Jesus, and it would make me so angry. How could they abdicate their duty to some imaginary man I know that a lot of hospitals are Saint Enter the Blank children's hospitals,
Sure.
but I feel like they were trying to indoctrinate me by exploiting my pain.
Oh man, you
should
think that's bad? Let me tell you, a friend of mine, very recent experience. She's epileptic. Okay, she went to a hospital here in town that shall remain nameless, except to say that it's South Austin, and you should never go there if you're sick with anything, because it's staffed by morons. A neurologist at that hospital recommended to my epileptic friend that she do past life regression therapy.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I am not shitting you. It's like, and I told her, I wish I could have been there.
Yeah.
Because you would have seen the ultimate Simon Cowell moment where I tear this woman in half and basically ask her to her face, how does someone as stupid as you get to be a neurologist in a hospital?
Yeah.
I wish I could have done that. So if you think your experience was bad, a lot of hospitals are God-soaked and woo-soaked. And look, it's great if a hospital wants to have, say a chaplain on staff, or someone for their religious patients who want, for the sake of the comfort of it, to have a little bit of counseling or someone who will come in and pray with them and what have you.
Yeah.
But what happens at South Austin is the chaplain just makes the rounds, whether you ask them to or not. And, okay, on the one hand, sure, they're being nice, visit all the patients. But then they, ask a little prodding, religious questions, and it's kind of rude. You think about, well, why are you asking me how is my faith holding up? Why do you assume that I have share your beliefs or any beliefs at all? It's just presumptuous.
How old were you when this was going on, and what were your beliefs at the time?
Well, I always grew up in a secular family, so I never really found a reason for religion. And then when they would talk to me about it, it would just, I don't know, it would just make me so upset. Because, like...
In what way? I'm trying to get to...
No, like, they would always say, like, pain is caused by the devil and stuff, and that it's okay if you feel bad now because it's going to be okay later if you were a good person and going to heaven and stuff like that. And it was really scary.
You had nurses saying this to you?
Yeah.
And did nobody complain about this?
I mean, I never really told anyone about it.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that. If you're a little kid, you don't really feel like you have a right to complain when grown-ups say things to you. So you're right. I mean, it was very unfair for you to be put on the spot like that by an adult who was kind of...
But do I have a right to feel victimized, or am I misplacing myself?
I think that... I would say that you certainly have a right to be irked and angry about it.
You have a right to your feelings,
Yeah,
regardless.
you obviously do. I think that perhaps you could... Again, a lot of this kind of to us, it's a great deal of insensitivity when people do this. But we also kind of, on the one hand, have to say, all right, listen, I don't want to be reactionary about it. And this person is saying this to me because they sincerely believe that it's a kind and good thing to say to me. And they're not saying it to be like, haha, screw you, you mean atheist. Well, God will show you. They're not doing it to be insulting. And a lot of it is just cluelessness on their part.
Yeah.
It's so, in a sense, it's kind of an innocent cluelessness where they're devout believers, and that's how they live their lives. And so for them to just talk to someone about, oh, well, I know you're hurting and it's really bad, but that's okay because your guardian angel is looking over, whatever kind of crap they say, right? And you're sitting there seething going, God, don't insult my intelligence like that. Well, again, to them, and I know it sounds like I'm making excuses for them, but they kind of don't know better if they've lived in that life.
In most cases, they have the best possible intentions, and they think they're doing what's right.
Yeah.
You have a right to your feelings, and you certainly have a right to feel victimized to some extent. I mean, and I don't want to speak for Jeff D, but this is the one particular area where that outrages him, and it outrages me as well, especially when you have adults
and kids
imposing this upon kids
who aren't equipped to respond.
Now,
all right, well, thank you so much. I'd like to let you get on to the next caller.
Well, I appreciate it, John.
All
Thanks.
right. Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Yeah. But to say again that those people, just to be nice and say, oh well, they have good intentions and don't be too offended by. At the same time, yes, it is offensive, and so perhaps this is where, like Dawkins with his consciousness raising meme that he keeps talking about. This is what maybe that kind of consciousness raising will lead to. People go, oh, okay, well, I didn't mean to I didn't realize that what I said was offensive to you, or insensitive.
In some cases, for some denominations, they don't care if it's offensive to you.
Yeah, I mean, the more fundamentalist they are, they don't. Yeah,
they got the truth, and you need to know it whether you like it or not. And to those people, those are the people whose face I will get into.
Right. The higher the fundamentalism level, the higher the sense of entitlement.
In Ray's book, he quotes something Penn Jillette said about a guy who came up after the show and gave him a Bible, and this quote's made the rounds among apologists. Because Penn made a point, which several others of us have made before too. If you sincerely believed that I have a soul and that it's in trouble, how much do you have to hate a person not to tell them about it? There's a difference between caring enough about a person to tell them what you think is real, and trying to push this down the throat of somebody who clearly has no interest and doesn't share. If you come knocking on my door in the middle of the night to tell me that my house is on fire, I'm going to thank you. If it turns out
it's on fire,
it turns out my house isn't on fire, I'm probably still going to thank you, and kind of leave it at that, because I don't want to be a dick. If you are knocking on my door and waking me up every night to tell me my house is on fire and it's never on fire, I look and I don't see any fire, and then when questioned on it, you say, well, it's not on fire now, but it will be eventually, and I just want you to get out now.
You're a dick.
You're a dick.
You're a dick. That's what you are.
All right. And now we've made sure that we're not putting this show on ACTV. Who's next, John?
We have Timothy in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Timothy in Charlotte. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Fine.
Thanks for calling.
Hey, Martin, Matt, appreciate what you guys do. Let me turn down the volume here on the TV.
Thank you.
No, that's all right.
Okay, question's actually for Matt. I just want to make this very brief because I feel like George and Patrick were kind of hinting at what I wanted to know. Matt, several years ago when you were a fundamentalist Christian, I wanted to know, I've been wanting to know for a couple months what it was like for you to actually engage or debate a non-Christian or a non-believer at that time. The reason I'm curious is because you're so logical and so reasonable, and I mean, was that stuff just out the window, or did you have to stick with the classic, apologist responses? I mean, what would be the expectation?
I can give a fairly simple and probably short answer. It almost never happened. I had a roommate who was an atheist while I was still a Christian. I had a conversation with a family member who I consider to be spiritually wise and giving good information. We had a conversation about how do I talk to him? How do I approach him? I was not an extremely outgoing, I was fundamentalist in my beliefs and I was devout in my beliefs, but I was not out banging down doors or street preaching or, that was something that I thought might eventually happen, which is when I started the studying. And my family member and I had a conversation about this, and the argument that he presented to me, which I immediately found to be a duh, obviously there's a God, was the argument for morality. And I didn't ever actually bother to present it to my roommate atheist, but I did have a discussion with another atheist about it. And my approach, I mean, I realize on the show, I can on occasion be arrogant, condescending, snappy, dismissive, all of those things. It's all who I am, and sometimes I can be, thoughtful and carry on a good conversation. At that point, the conversation, I was not forceful or pushy because I was not very self-assured in my beliefs at the time. I thought that the moral argument was pretty convincing until I had a conversation with somebody who recommended that I go do some more reading on it. The short answer is it rarely happened, and I was in the weak position and knew I was in the weak position, which was what prompted me to go out and do more studying so I could avoid being in the weak position. And now I'm not.
Makes sense. That's about it then.
All right. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Bye, Mark.
We've got like 15 minutes left.
Do we have to stick to the strict, or do we just
we do if we want to get the clip
on
up
the air?
On the air. And there's some other stuff that needs to happen. But I want to get a couple of quick announcements out of the way. Chris Comer was supposed to be the lecturer in July for our monthly lecture series, or sorry, June. She was unable to make it. She'll be doing the lecture in August. So the first Sunday in August, that lecture will be Chris Comer. Additionally, after the program's over, normally we go to dinner at Threadgill's down at East Riverside. That will not be happening
Not
today.
happening, no.
Because if you could see the map of Texas, let's just pretend like this is Texas. Threadgill's is down here, and we're up here.
Yeah, like imagine, Norway on this map.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good half-hour drive for me to
and
get
my
to
and my
Threadgill's.
place in that little my house is like
Yeah.
sort of where my shoe is, so it was quite a long drive to get here today. But
So what we're going to do today, and Beth, get ready to laugh, is we're going to Pluckers up by the Lake Creek Mall. Don reminded me to get the address for everybody. I forgot. I don't have the address, but there are several Pluckers locations. There's one in Round Rock. There's one downtown. There's one at Burnett 183. There's also one up north in the 620 area around Lake Creek Parkway. It's there by the mall, not far from Rooms to Go and a Best Buy and everything. You can find us there. We're going to go ahead and end at about 6 o'clock like normal. We will probably be up at Pluckers around 6:30. So any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events, including the after-show dinner at Pluckers today. It's a wing bar, by the way, so if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, you're pretty much going to have to order the chicken salad without chicken. They're so proud of their meat tendencies that they have a T-shirt that says, "For vegetarians, we proudly serve chicken that once ate vegetables." Sorry, we're not making this a regular. It was just what we picked for today.
Yeah,
I might just shuffle it around. So you have to stay tuned to see where we're going.
right. So
Who's next?
I'm okay with Pluckers.
We have Kevin in Windsor, Colorado.
Kevin in Windsor,
Kevin.
Colorado.
And can you hear us, Kevin? Are you there? Just a second.
Well, while we're waiting on Kevin, as a reminder, if you want to participate in the show during this time that we're doing it live from Dillahunty International Studios, you'll need to download Skype. That's SKYPE at Skype.com. Do an install, create yourself an account. It's absolutely free. Then add the account Atheist TV. One word, no spaces. ATHEIST TV. And when we're on the air, do not call us. We won't be accepting any calls. Send an IM with your name, your location, and what you want to talk about. And John will put you in the queue, and we'll call you back. So stand by and be ready, to go. Who we got?
Kevin in Windsor, Colorado. And have we connected to Kevin? All right.
If you're there, Kevin, we can't hear you.
Let's try Matthew.
Kevin, we're sorry we couldn't get you. Matthew.
Matthew in Gibraltar.
All right. Matthew.
He's not expecting this so soon, so give him a second.
Okay. All right. There's a lag that we always have to remember is there.
Yeah.
So.
And Frank's
Otherwise-
putting up graphics on the screen. We don't have our regular CG machine.
No. So we get Comic Sans on the.
Yeah. So,
Hi.
is this Matthew?
Yeah, that's right. Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can. Hear you very well.
Great. I just wanted to talk about morality.
All right.
Are you in agreement that morality is subjective?
It depends.
Here we go.
Wow.
Yeah. I think that morality is something that is often talked about in too simplistic terms. It's usually talked about in either or terms, for example, subjective or objective. I don't think it's completely subjective. I think that the moral precepts we use are based on, for example, the fact that actions have consequences, which are things that can be objectively observed. They can be seen.
But the assessment is ultimately subjective.
Right. But it's at the same time, it's not. We used to have on our blog a Christian apologist who would always hit the comments, and he would always say, "Oh well, then it's nothing but your preferences, your personal preferences, dictating to you what's right or wrong." And I'm like, well, not really, because the things that happen to be my personal preferences, for example, I don't like getting hurt. So I can reach if I punch somebody else in the mouth, then that hurts them, and it can probably hurt me. So I can work that all out for myself. whatever my preferences are, they're personal, but again, they don't exist in a vacuum. We are social creatures, and the things that are our preferences tend to be shared amongst us. In most cases, where moral precepts.
But still,
that we
ultimately,
have,
to answer your question, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, and I agree that every moral dilemma is completely different. So you have to look at each moral dilemma in a completely.
But I wouldn't say morality is not subjective in the way that, say, your taste in music is subjective, right?
I agree with that. For instance, I would say killing is. I don't know if you would call that universal truth or universal moral kind of law. Or
I would
like
kill
that.
someone who was trying to kill me.
Well, yeah,
I would not. I would not do it otherwise. So there are. You're right. It's one of those situations where you'll find apologists will want to address morality as if it were this very black and white simplistic thing that could be simply delineated in a list of obvious rules, and it's never really that clean.
Well, that brings me to this this thing that I was thinking of. It's basically well, you could call it a moral kind of rule to live by or law. What I put it down as was let me see if I can find it here. Any action which is first, it has to be intentional. So any action which is intentional and unnecessary and does harm to life, I would say that's immoral. Now, I've kind of applied that moral rule to every moral dilemma I can think of, and it kind of seems to work.
I could, at first blush, that to me sounds like it would largely work.
Yeah.
There may be, it's possible I may be able to think of exceptions, or we may be able to quibble over definitions or whatever. But as a general kind of summation, that may be one of the clearest and best I've heard.
Yeah, I think that's a good solid precept that you've come up with, because you have pointed out the little detail of it's unnecessary, and it's intentional, it's harmful, but it's unnecessary. There's no reason. There's nothing to be gained for the greater good by doing this. I don't.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was talking to someone on YouTube a few days ago about this, and then they came back to me saying, "Well, what is unnecessary?"
Right. That's the problem.
I thought about it, and I got back to him, and I said, "By unnecessary, what I mean is not necessary to one's own survival or well-being." Would you agree with that?
I think that might be. I think that might be a little too narrow. That's the problem, is that it's nice to have unnecessary in there. It's just that now you need to figure out, okay, what does and does not qualify for necessity. And in that case, what you're doing is you're setting up a single criteria of the benefit of my life, for example. And it may be the case that necessity is this spectrum of weighing a bunch of different factors: what's best for me, what's best for Martin, what's best for the group, what's best for the whole of society, and trying to do a cost-benefit analysis. We're really good at doing these types of things intuitively. It's virtually impossible for us to actually quantify and do it, which is why most of these types of summation moralities tend to get stuck at some point. They work as long as we're all kind of in agreement on what's necessary.
Yeah, like I think what your precept, I think, is strong as long as you're talking about situations, okay, with the combination of deliberate, harmful, and unnecessary being situations where, for example, the actor is initiating this situation, where as opposed to someone who is responding to that actor on their own. For example, someone may decide, I think I'll kill Martin and take his wallet, right? Okay, so I defend myself. Now it comes down to the question of, well, would it be necessary for me to kill this person in self-defense so that they don't kill me? Maybe that's not necessary. Maybe it would be simply adequate for me to disarm them, or frighten them off otherwise, or scream for help and direct, bring attention to this. So if I actually kill this person who's decided they want to kill me for my wallet or whatever reason they've come up with, Now, have I done a bad thing by killing them if it was not entirely necessary for me to do it? Can I justify that? And that sometimes that becomes a real problem sometimes in certain court cases where self-defense is not always very clearly So you're right. It can become more ambiguous depending on the context of the circumstance.
In that particular situation, what I would say is it's very difficult when you have a situation like that to weigh up what would be the best action to take. Now, I don't always think that things are either moral or immoral. I think that sometimes it can be neither. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and also, I kind of have this view with regard to sexuality as well. We put labels on it: heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. In reality, I think sexuality is a spectrum, and I've said it before. I may be 10% gay. I don't know how you would do that. The same may be true for morality, depending on which criteria you're going to judge. Is this most beneficial for me? Is it beneficial for the group, etc.? And I just realized that you may have another problem in the initial one, which is intentional. I realize that this is technically cheating because you're assessing Act A, the action of doing something. But if there wasn't an intent there's kind of a meta Act A that could be negligence, reckless disregard. In other words, I took an action without any intent to harm, but the fact that I was inconsiderate, negligent, there doesn't matter if there wasn't any malice, I've still done something that perhaps I would consider immoral, unethical. My carelessness would be the immoral part.
For instance, drink driving.
Yeah.
Or not even drunk driving.
There's intent. I mean, you got behind the wheel.
Yeah, not even drunk driving. You could you could blow a tire and lose control of your car, and without control of your car, just plow into a pedestrian on the sidewalk, because it can be entirely accidental.
Well,
but now that's not.
That's
deliberate.
That's an accident. It's out of your control.
So
it's tough.
Yeah,
and that's I think the most important point to take away from all of this, is that as tough as it is, we've done a pretty good job, and we're getting better at it, and we're learning more about it all the time. What I find absurd are these religious ideas that would say, there is a moral absolute. Here's the moral authority. Everything's black and white. This is the issue. Bam.
And then those same people turn around and tell you that salvation is by faith and not works anyway, rendering questions of morality pretty much irrelevant in their religions. So
in that particular case, yeah.
But I would say reason is the only way to to come to clear decisions which are good for society regarding morality.
I would say
and
that's
the laws that we make.
Definitely on the same page there. We are closing in on almost not enough. How much time we got left, Frank? We have 1 minute.
Well, so thanks for talking to us. Thank you for coming.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for
absolutely.
Bye.
We have a minute, so Frank's gonna have to run the credits, and so we're gonna have to run music. I just want to thank everybody who tuned in live to the stream and who called in. Spread the word to other people that they can call in on Skype. We'll do what we can. We'll continue to make improvements. Please send your feedback to tv@atheist-community.org.